Welcome to the People of Nature podcast, a platform for the conservation optimism stories from the unheard voices in India. Today, we have with us a very special guest, Dr. Shalini Dhyani. Welcome, Dr. Shalini ji, to People of Nature podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be part of this podcast. Thank you so much, Pankaj.
So, let me introduce today's guest to our audience. Dr. Shalini works as a principal scientist, CSIR, National Environmental Engineering Research Institute. She is Asia Vice Chair and Steering Committee member in the Commission on Ecosystem Management of IUCN. She is a visiting scientist at CIFOR-ICRAF, Indonesia. Dr. Shalini works on interlinkages between socio-ecological systems, following diverse knowledge systems and sustainability science approaches for ecosystem health assessments and implementing nature-based solutions. She has been the lead author of the IPBES Global Thematic Assessment on the Sustainable Use of Wild Species and the Asia Pacific Regional Assessment of Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. It needs no mention that Dr. Shalini has published many research papers, edited books, and popular articles on mainstreaming NBS in reducing biodiversity, in climate change, land degradation, and disaster risks. So I'm really thrilled to interview a great personality in our studio. Welcome once again, Dr. Shalini ji, to our show.
Thank you so much once again. And I really look forward to be part of this podcast.
Thank you, Dr. Shalini. So we will now move towards questions. And our audience wants to know more about your journey. And as we discuss it, I hope we will explore the multidimensionality of the sustainability sector. So here's my first question to you, Dr. Shalini. You have been working in the environmental field for more than 18 years. How did your interests build up? Were there any specific moments or influences that guided your path in this field?
Um, Thank you once again, Pankaj. And I think it's really interesting to revisit the memory lane. And this memory lane has been really long, almost 18 years, looking where from I started. So my master's was in botany, whereas my interest was more in chemistry. But I think one of the life-changing moments was visiting Nanda Devi Biosphere Reserve and later on working in BRT Hills
Okay.
in Karnataka. So I remember my first experience of working with people was very different. This is a very different experience than what you work when you work inside the labs. So lab experiments are very different, and so are the field-based experiences. Uh, so my interest, I should say, has come a lot from working with mountain people in Nanda Devi Biosphere Reserve, and especially the local transhuman community, the Bhutia tribes who are Indo-Mongoloid, and they inculcated a lot of my interest into conservation. So this first experience during my masters was a life-changing experience, and that was when I actually decided that there is more need of scientists or researchers, and especially women, to work in higher Himalayas. And my fascination was a lot for forest areas, especially these high altitude temperate forests, both broadleaf as well as evergreen forest areas. So I think this is the very primary linkage when I should say that I really wanted, initially, I just wanted to be inside the forest to see how these ecosystems are. But over the years, when I started working with communities also and how they shape the forest and how forest influence these communities and their life and lifestyle, I think this is where from my path to this journey started.
Mhm.
And these were the very initial moments, and I must say these are very special moments. And I feel like I can see those snow-cladded mountains while discussing this with you.
Wow, that's just really amazing. It's so deep down that when as a master students when you work, and that basically became your research career, and now we see that you have been doing so much and so valuable, like a almost like a milestone at every places that you have been So it's really wonderful, Dr. Shalini, to listen from you that you have been this through this incredible journey. So you did a PhD in forestry. So can you tell us more about this PhD research and how did it build up your postdoc research?
Uh, yes. So my master's work was in Nanda Devi Biosphere Reserve, where I was working on one of the threatened plants, Swartia
Okay.
chiraita. That's a high altitude growing plant. But
Mhm.
later on, for my PhD, my guide wanted me to focus in Kedarnath Wildlife Sanctuary, the same
Okay.
area from where this pilgrimage happens for Kedarnath. And
Yeah,
this
yeah.
is a very different area from where researchers have usually focused. So most of the researchers have focused in the core zone area near Chopta and all these area. But my
Okay.
guide wanted me to exactly see how these forests are, where and what kind of natural and man-made pressure are inside these forests. So
Mhm.
this was a very interesting topic, and I must say the reason of staying longer with this research area was the kind of topic that was offered to me, and also
Okay.
to work on biophysical aspects of natural and man-made pressure on forest areas. But at the
Mhm.
same time, I was also looking to canopy gap dynamics when
Okay.
canopies are open inside the forest, how they promote
Yeah.
regeneration, how there is the change in microclimatic conditions, how regeneration
Yeah.
happens, what is the case of seed bank. So these were all
Mhm.
the interesting ideas that my guide offered me. But I think something that touched me while I started living in these villages with the community and then working at high altitude areas with the pastoral communities, I think that was one of the life changing moments where my work started not only focusing on the biophysical aspects of natural and man made pressure, but also to look why these pressure are there actually. And most of this pressure is basically for subsistence life style or subsistence requirement of these communities. So that's why my research also included two more topics of the biomass flow from forest to nearby villages. And I also tried to look into local governance system and why we need more of an interactive governance system in these areas, because many a times a right-based approach has better outcomes and conservation outcomes in these areas. So this was one of the building blocks that I started with my PhD. And because I was doing my PhD from Forest Research Institute, Dehradun, my PhD has to be in forestry, and FRI definitely had its own brand name. And I was working in GB Pant Institute for National Institute of Himalayan Forest and Environment, and my PhD site was Kedarnath Wildlife Sanctuary. And this is very different than Nanda Devi. If you know
Mhm.
Nanda Devi, it's more of a dry temperate area where 80% snowfall and 20% rainfall happens. And if you see
Okay.
Kedarnath, it's 80% rainfall and 20% snowfall zone. It's entirely different
Oh,
valley altogether.
right.
Yeah. So, so
Mhm.
that's how I think I started looking more to communities. What are the drudgery linked with the
Mhm.
forest degradation and all those things, and that's how my forest PhD in forestry shaped up. And I should also mention that my postdoctoral research work was also very much linked with my
Mhm.
PhD, because during my
Okay.
later stages of PhD, I realized that a lot of deforestation is directly linked with women drudgery. And drudgery is
Right.
basically more during the lean periods in mountains, when it's the time when you don't get fodder inside the forest areas. It's all
Yeah.
dry because a lot of tree leaves are shed. It's during the autumn time and during the winter time, and
Right.
women used to leave their houses. So I used to stay in this one of the houses of the village, where the
Mhm.
women were leaving at 4 a.m. in the morning in the winter mornings
Oh,
of November, and they were
wow.
returning back sometime after half a day was gone, just to fetch that fodder so that they can feed their livestock.
Mhm.
And I think that was again a moment when I thought that my postdoc should actually be on this.
Right.
And that's how my postdoc was on developing a fodder bank model for the community, and with
Okay.
especially women in this area. And the
Mhm.
focus was not to impose my scientific knowledge, but also learn from them what they
Right.
want,
Right.
what their traditional knowledge system is, how can we hybridize both scientific and indigenous knowledge
Mm,
systems to come up with a solution that's more feasible, implementable, scalable. So that's how
mm,
I worked and developed this model. And
right.
fortunately, uh, it was also considered by South Forestry Center Bhutan as one of the most innovative solution for mountain women. And I got several
Mm,
recognitions just for that particular model. And that's how my research also had a transition from biophysical
mm.
to socio-ecological context.
Wow, that is just an amazing and, in fact, a very inspiring story indeed. I mean, I think our audience will be thrilled to know that such things happen, and researchers, when they go in the field, they don't just remain researchers, but then they, eventually transform into people who are caring for the systems and bringing positive changes to the systems as well. So that's really amazing. Thanks a lot, Dr. Shalini ji, for sharing that bit of an experience and information with us. So, Shalini, now you are in a very different role. You are into teaching as well, and you have a considerable teaching experience. So, recently, what have been your observations about students, young students, and how perhaps it might have changed over the years? Can you shed some light on that?
Yeah, Pankajji, I think my very initial teaching experience came from during my PhD when I was a
Mhm.
guest faculty to HNP Gadwal University in to master's students in forestry. Later, I was also visiting faculty to Kutch University in Gujarat in Bhuj.
Okay.
And then with NEERI, I'm one of the assistant professors for ACSIR, MTech and
Mhm.
PhD students as well.
Right.
And
Right.
I've
Yeah.
been fortunate to be also academic counselor for IGNU and few other
Mhm.
universities. I
Yes.
must say, uh, as a scientist with NEERI and also working as a faculty to multiple universities, one thing is
Mhm.
that every student that I've came across, because I also get involved with a lot of students through virtual internship programs,
Mhm.
and
Right.
I see all these students have a lot of zeal. It's up
Okay.
to researchers and scientists and academicians how we really want to shape up, how they
Mhm.
really we want to give them a direction. And I'll just quote
Okay.
a small anecdote from my during the COVID days, where it was really tough to see the researchers and these students
Yes.
working on fields or bring them to your laboratories because everything was stopped. So I
Right.
remember I had these few students from different universities who were working with us, and I asked
Mhm.
them to focus their work in their towns, in their cities. So there was
Okay.
this one researcher from Kochi who was working on the
Mhm.
maps of Kochi. While
Okay.
everybody is so fascinated to go to other cities, but we never consider working in our own towns and cities
Right.
and our nearby forest areas.
Right.
And there was this one student from Delhi, and there was
Mhm.
another student who was from Assam.
Okay.
And they all worked on three interesting projects that they never thought would be so interesting in their own towns and cities. And this was
Wow.
also the first batch who actually brought in publications after their masters. So I don't
Amazing.
consider that it's just a criteria to say that
Mhm.
it's a successful initiative, but I must say that how we shape these students, because many of
Right.
them, scientific field is a altogether a field where every now and then you have to be really active, you have to be
Right.
really learning mode, and you have to be also in a mode to contribute something back to the society. So I
Yeah.
think my observation with students has been very positive, because I came
Mhm.
across not only students from India but also outside also, and we have
Mhm.
created some very interesting projects. And I always thought that students should also use their mind. It should not be only
Mhm.
mentors or guides ideas that
Right.
they're implementing. So I think I've been really fortunate in last few years, where now I see a lot of students bringing some very innovative ideas, and thanks
Mhm.
to a lot of social media, thanks to
Yeah.
internet, all those facilities that has brought in a lot of curiosity, interest, and they also know the kind of challenge and demand this profession has. So
Mhm.
where that all has made them so active. So I
Yes.
have positive notes with teaching, and I have very positive notes also to the students who are working with me or even virtually working virtually, or what I
Mhm.
observe in other labs. So I have very
Right.
positive vibes about these students.
Thanks a lot, Shalini ji, for mentioning that today's generation is quite positive about looking or working in these fields, and they are also looking forward to make a career in it and coming with their own ideas, original research. I think that really matters. So, Shalini ji, moving forward, as a Asia Vice Chair and Steering Committee member in the Commission on Ecosystem Management of IUCN, what are your observations and experience working with other parties? Which urgent actions need to be taken for conserving flora and fauna?
Thank you, Pankaj. I think before I go ahead in answering this question, because my
Mhm.
your previous question was more related with students and teaching.
Yes, yes.
So my journey with IUCN started almost 19 to 20 years back as a young
Okay,
professional.
okay,
And I joined IUCN Commission on Ecosystem Management as a young professional during my PhD to learn
okay.
actually what happens in these international platforms, what discussions are
Mhm.
happening, and how can I live and learn more about what is happening at the
Right,
global level.
right.
So it was long journey where I also did a lot of nitty gritties of how to set up a
Mhm.
newsletter, how to edit these
Okay.
things, and I learned a lot in this process. So I still
Mhm.
encourage my people and youngsters I know to join as a young professional. But I
Okay.
think for my fodder bank, I got my first award from IUCN as the
Yes.
chair's first award in 2014, and I was nominated the lead for young professionals of CEM. And
Mhm.
then in 2016, uh, because by that time my work in Uttarakhand in Himalayas, the fodder bank model was identified as a model that has a huge potential for ecosystem based approaches for disaster risk
Mhm.
reduction. So I was never
Right.
knowing that reducing soil erosion and reducing
Mhm.
landslide risk is basically a good ecosystem based approach. So I was never
Okay.
aware about this terminology, but thanks to IUCN
Mhm.
who brought in these new terminologies, and that's how I started moving into this domain almost a decade or more than that back.
Right, right, yeah.
And in 2016, I was nominated to become the South Asia Regional Chair. Again, I was one of the youngest to become that.
Oh,
And in 2022, I was later actually invited as a Asia Vice Chair. And this is
okay.
a huge responsibility considering they are mostly senior people who are part of the senior steering committee members, very
Right.
senior in their professions, and I mean, also in terms of the rank and how involved they are at the international level. So I was really
Mhm.
fortunate that I got this opportunity at the right
Mhm.
time, or you can say a little early. But I
Right.
think uh, it also means that I had a huge responsibility to contribute back, and also
Yes.
responsibility to take the discussions happening in the steering committee back to the region and see how my
Mhm.
region can contribute and
Okay.
include the best of the research in what we are doing.
Mhm.
So the part of being a steering committee member is a huge responsibility, as I mentioned. And my
Okay.
experience of working with these continental chairs and regional
Mhm.
the vice chairs is very important because, as I mentioned, there are people who are actually doing a lot of high level activities at international level and also
Right.
influencing a lot of global policies and decisions. So I did learn a lot, and I got this opportunity to actually implement some of the innovative ideas not only for India but also for
Mhm.
Asia. For example, in last few years, we did a lot in terms of nature-based solutions. You were talking about having the podcast in regional languages,
Yeah.
and we tried to bring in almost nine Asian languages,
Oh,
where NBS global standards are now translated. We're also
wow.
trying to bring this knowledge to very grassroots level so that these
Mhm.
local language translations can go to local people where they can see what exactly
Yes.
nature-based solutions are and why there is so much of buzz internationally. So these are some of the
Yes.
things we wanted to do, and we're also trying to bring in a lot of ecosystem health assessments, and this is very
Okay.
important for as per global
Mhm.
biodiversity framework under the target A. So this is the another activity, and I must say it's not just 1 year or 2 year. It has been more than 5 to 7 years of continuous efforts to bring these things to Asia. So yes,
Okay.
we have. I personally, and it's not a single person's job. Your members should actually contribute. So
Okay.
fortunately, members have been really motivated for contribution. So this has really helped Asia
Mhm.
to be highlighted in the steering committee meetings as well. And when you talk about urgent actions needed to be taken
Mhm.
for conserving flora and fauna,
Yes.
so Commission on Ecosystem Management now broadly is basically a ecosystem commission. So
Okay.
we think ecosystem to be a broader umbrella where
Mhm.
all these flora and flora are flourishing. So it's very
Yes.
important that we understand what is the exact status, because in last almost 50 to 60 years red listing of species is going on, but
Yeah.
now the status is that even before we know or discover the species, it gets lost or it gets
Yes.
extinct.
Yes.
It's very important now we bring in a criteria where we can say that this ecosystem is basically vulnerable, threatened, or maybe
Mhm.
going to collapse soon. So this
Right.
also means that if this ecosystem is going to collapse soon or it's facing hidden collapse, all the species basically living under this umbrella are highly
Right.
vulnerable and they
Yeah.
need immediate priority of protection. So
Yes.
directly or indirectly, this broader umbrella is basically covering different kinds of flora, fauna, and also other species. I mean, humans
Mhm.
and other abiotic components that are acting,
Yeah. Right.
interacting, acting as a driver to these.
Yes. Okay, that's pretty amazing. I mean, I think many of us did not know that this is how things work. And since you're mentioning about a broader umbrella where you're working, and a lot of people actually just look at tiger, as a system, or maybe a particular species, and they just focus their efforts on it. But I think we need to really consider holistically and broadly and look at various ecosystems, as you just mentioned, that this is how the conservation is going to work. Otherwise, there's no point just conserving a particular species in the landscape. So thanks a lot, Dr. Shalini, for that enlightening statements. And I think a lot of our audience was really not aware about this. This is how things work. So thanks a lot again for adding that information. So moving forward, so you have also worked on several environmental law cases closely with the NGT. So, how has your experience been working with the government and on the side of locals? So, do locals really get enough legal support for land rights related cases, or any other such cases where they are involved? What is your experience, and what are your opinions about it?
Pankajji, so for this, uh, NEERI gets a lot of invitation from
Mhm.
not only NGT, I must say, but also from Honorable Supreme Court and Honorable High
Mhm.
Courts.
Mhm.
And this is basically the years of credibility that organization has supported
Right.
government. And I should not say this is supporting the government. Basically, this is supporting the legislature of the country to
Correct.
make a
Okay.
more data driven and evidence based decision making. And
Mhm.
little bit more to the audience about how NGT works. So it's basically
Mhm.
more of litigations filed by the public or organization who are really concerned that certain things or certain kind of developments are hampering the environment and the quality of life of people surrounding or living in these areas. So it started almost after my joining NEERI almost 11 years back. And I remember I was really hesitant to take the first case. Uh, so there have been multiple cases that I have worked across the country, right from the Taj Trapezium in Agra or rat hole mining in Meghalaya, or in even the recent road broadening happening in Pune, and then some of the lakes in parts of Maharashtra, some cases in Udaipur. So there are many cases that have been involved in, and I think this is the time when you are invited to be helping the legislature to support them understand the crux of the entire problem and what can be the right solution. So it is a lot of responsibility basically on our shoulders. So that means also that we have to be really concerned, really neutral, and only using science to help the legislator to make the right decision. So this decision has to be supported by the right kind of science and right kind of understanding of those issues. So I think so far NGT has been, and these cases audience should understand are not research work that go on for years and years. Uh,
Correct. Yeah.
Most of these court cases don't get enough of time. You get a month or two
Mhm.
to actually come up with that entire research understanding of with the primary data, with the secondary information, doing the analysis and helping them with a very brief, very to the point report, not long reports, to just help them to understand the scenario. So far
Okay.
it has been a huge learning experience, and that I consider as a scientist has been a,
Mm.
a great contribution to the society and the country. And I must say that there is a huge legal support to public.
Mhm.
I should, in the country like India, where of course there are different things that happen, and we know there is a development taking a lot of importance and priority over conservation. But at the
Yeah.
same time, we really need to see how a balance can be established between environment and the kind of development. So sometimes we also get confused with the kind
Mm.
of massive development our cities are having. How do you
Yes.
ensure people get justice? So human rights issues and how
Mhm.
justice is ensured so that everybody gets access to good environment is quite an
Yeah.
honest of all of us. But in this entire process, what I have seen is that courts, honorable high courts, honorable
Mhm.
NGT have a very clear lens. They truly respect the scientific ideas coming in, and they
Okay.
make a very a decision that is driven by data, not by emotions, not by
Mhm.
happening around, but with very practical understanding of this issue. And in this entire process, uh, locals do, and their legal rights, land tenurial rights are very much
Mhm.
acknowledged. So my
Okay.
experience has been a very nice experience in that process, and it has been a
Mhm.
huge learning experience because based on our decisions, if a decision is made, that means we really have to be very careful. And
Right.
so this has been really, and I must say that honorable high courts have been very considerate, very
Mhm.
understanding. They do understand a lot what is happening in this country.
Okay. That's really nice to know that we, as a country, we have a system and it works, and scientists are valued, their opinions are valued, data-based, evidence-based science is valued, and it is considered for legal cases. I think that is something that all of our audience should understand, that there is a system and it is in place, and top scientists are working as a part of it. So thanks a lot again, Dr. Shalini ji, for expressing your mind about how you are involved in all these cases, and not just you, but multiple other scientists who are also involved as experts or consultants in such cases, and how that really system, that system really works. So once again, thanks a lot, because this is a new information. For many of us, we don't really connect with the legal system, and we don't know what's happening over there. But if someone is, someone is telling us the information, someone is telling us what goes on inside, then I think it really builds up trust, and I think having trust in the system really matters a lot for conservation. So once again, thank you for that answer. Now I will move to some of the points that you mentioned in your earlier answers, and I think all of us are pretty excited to know about them. The first one is the ecosystem health assessment, which you mentioned earlier. So would you please elaborate a little bit on what exactly these ecosystem health assessments are, and if laymen can contribute towards it?
Yeah. So ecosystem health assessment, as I mentioned in my earlier answer, also are very crucial.
Mhm.
They started even before global biodiversity framework came in 2022 December, where now it's a headline indicator of target A. So that
Okay.
also means all the countries who are part of CBD really need to mainstream. And that also means that in the NBSAPs, the National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan that we'll prepare, and the national targets that we're projecting, we'll really need to actually integrate this ecosystem health assessment approach. Why? The question comes why we really need to understand and why we need to project. I've already given a brief understanding on why we need to move from species to ecosystem, because we
Yes.
don't have time, and species red listing is going for such longer time, and it's not
Mhm.
possible to discover all the species, and even before we know, we are losing those species. So it will
Right.
be a never ending process of red listing them, and its recovery will be even more tough to reintroduce or
Mhm.
conserve or protect these species. So that's how this terminology came in, and this was in
Okay.
discussions and in collaboration with both Species Survival Commission and Ecosystems Management. But
Mhm.
later on, I mean, there are multiple scientists from across the world who are involved with this. Uh, so I think almost 4 to 5 years back, we invited one of the experts from Australia who was working with the ecosystem health assessment, and IUCN has a IUCN red listing of ecosystem tool to that. So there are multiple 5 criterias and multiple indicators to access that. So that's how I always have this interest. We are not sure that how government might perceive it, because a lot of our targets are being met by these ecosystems. If you talk about forest, our NDCs, our land degradation neutrality, or even our restoration targets are to be fulfilled by these forests. So how do you actually do these red listing? And the second thing is, it is also a very important tool to prioritize conservation. For example, if you do ecosystem health assessment, you know what is the exact status at the current time. You know exactly where to focus, where are the hotspots, and what kind of priority action should be undertaken. So this was the basic understanding behind ecosystem health assessment. Uh, and then the second important thing is, a lot of countries don't have enough of these database to support. So that's where I think participation of people is very, very important. We know as scientists, we project certain drivers, but there are many more hidden drivers that communities are aware about, because they are living in these landscapes and these are living in these ecosystems areas. So participatory contribution is very important. And 2 years back, we worked on one of the examples from Bhitarkanika. And Bhitarkanika is one of the biodiversity rich mangrove areas of the country. But at the same time, there are so many drivers, both natural and man made, that are affecting these mangrove areas. So that's where we invited not only scientists, we had an exclusive set of ideas where people can come forward and tell us what exactly drivers for these mangrove areas are, so that we can match both scientific drivers and the people participatory contributed drivers, and see where there is a consensus. And based on that, we develop scenarios for that area. So these are more realistic scenarios instead of just driven by scientists or just coming from one knowledge system. So I
Right.
think communities have a very huge, I mean, very big role to play in this entire exercise, especially for a country like India, where
Yes.
still a lot of marginalized and indigenous communities are living in these ecosystems.
Mm.
So far there has been no approach internationally where has it has been uh, uh, working on, but we definitely are looking forward to have more people's
Mhm.
contribution and communities. And fortunately in India, wherever we are working, so we just have one on Vitarkanika on the scenario modeling, exactly not ecosystem health assessment,
Mhm.
but we're working on few of the areas, and we recently got one publication on where exactly we are focusing. So maybe it will be
Okay.
out sometime in this week. We
Okay.
recently completed red listing of moist temperate forest areas in Uttarakhand. So for
Okay.
ecosystem health assessment, we don't have to look to geographical boundaries. We have to go at
Mhm.
ecosystem scale. So those scales are really large, the drivers are
Mhm.
immense, and the impact is also impact. So you have to look 5 decades back the scale, what happened in last
Mhm.
decade, and also see the
Okay.
future. So based on that, you actually assess. So this is very brief about ecosystem health assessment, but I really
Oh,
hope through this webinar that it will generate a lot of
Mhm.
curiosity, interest among
Yes.
even scientists and researchers to take up this issue for different
Yeah.
ecosystems they're working in.
Yeah, definitely. That is a amazing concept, and I think it's pretty much needed actually. That we are right now working on it, but I think many years back itself we should have started working on ecosystems rather than species. And as you're mentioning, that community plays a pivotal role in assessments, in monitoring, as well as uncovering, facts which perhaps scientists cannot, and perhaps through the indigenous knowledge system also, as you are referring. So you have worked actively with local communities. So in this entire journey, can you share any memorable experience you have where local communities played a pivotal role in conservation?
There are many stories, but here I would like to highlight one because that became a great learning experience for me as well. We
Mhm.
as humans have very complex psychologies, and
Mhm.
this definitely comes from the rights. If we have ownership, if we have rights, that means the resources are well conserved. So this experience also comes with the women self-help groups, or how we call it in Uttarakhand, Mahila Mangal Dals. So these are the informal decision makers of forest, especially one panchayats. And after going through a lot of these Mahila Mangaldal meetings, I realized in a couple of villages that basically noisy meetings are the most successful meetings, whereas the meeting where people are silent or quiet are the meeting that are really not good for forest or any ecosystem. So I think I realized the biggest lesson that for good governance on ground, it is important that people are really noisy. And why? Because once people had these rights, and women are not many a time decision makers, but at the same time they are the ones who conserve and destruct ecosystems. We know why, because they are the ones who have to collect the resource. So I think this memory has been etched in my entire life, and it will be always there, that
Mhm.
when women were shouting, that means they were more concerned about the rates, the health of forest. This
Yeah.
patch has to be closed for rotational harvesting. So if somebody is going inside, they're penalized. If some other village is in coming in their forest area, they are penalized.
Mhm.
Their sickles are confiscated. So these were
Yeah.
some very small I mean, if you see, they are very small experiences, but they also integrate towards the complex human psychology of
Right.
what conservation means to these communities. On the other
Mhm.
hand, if people are silent in these meetings, so they definitely don't worry. Nothing matters on what's happening in their forest area. So it
Right.
all has a lot to do with their legal rights on these forests. So that really helps them conserve or destruct the forest
Mhm.
area. So I think this is one interesting memory, and I hope your
Mhm.
audience will also be happy and like to
Yeah.
listen to this
So
memory.
that's amazing. I mean, it's a very peculiar observation. I think many of us wouldn't have even imagined that such an observation can actually tell you a lot about the human psychology and how connected they are with their landscape and the forest. But thanks a lot again for sharing. Very unique memory this is indeed. So amazing, amazing. So Shalini ji, moving forward, you have also worked with a lot of industries as a consultant. So how willing are corporates to effectively contribute to sustainability? What is your experience?
So Pankaj, I have very mixed opinions on that.
Okay.
Because industries have a different mandate to do. There is a
Yes.
certain environment is a kind of, I mean, for some industries it's a compliance, to meet the
Mhm.
compliance, while many industries, they have a larger image to keep up with. So for that, it's very important that their human rights issues, environment, all these are appropriately addressed. But
Right.
what my I worked with multiple industries, and mostly with restoration, or suggesting them how better
Mhm.
responsible restoration can take place.
Yeah.
So I think many a times industries, and they have a dedicated environment division who really goes to take care of these things. Uh,
Mhm.
But at the same time, I see that there are people who have enough information, understanding, and there
Mhm.
are many times those who don't understand any much of the landscape, because landscape is not just ecosystem, it comes with people as well. So you
Yes.
are basically required to keep balance with both to come up with a better and, I mean, outputs that
Mhm.
are more sustainable in nature. So a few years back, we brought in this corporate community partnership approach, because both these parties don't have good image most of the
Yeah.
time
Yeah.
because of the conflicts and the controversies. And a research
Yes.
organization can really bridge the gap. But in that entire
Mhm.
process, communities should get incentives, support of
Mhm.
livelihood, and if they get continuous livelihood and support, there are many chances that this entire relationship can be improved, the result outcome can be improved. So I think
Yes.
the way industries are working, some of them are really working, and some of them really want to improve and should improve. But at the
Right.
same time, it's not possible unless you involve communities in their entire conservation agenda. So that's
Mhm.
something I think I would like to suggest. And my experience have been mixed. For compliance, some of them are doing really interesting work, but
Mhm.
they also seek knowledge. They also, because they are
Yeah.
not scientists, they are not academicians, they are not the people who are supposed to do very scientific or ecosystem friendly, species conservation friendly exercises on ground. So they try something. Forest department is also supporting them to do some of these activities, but many a times I think academicians also need to come forward to give a good hand holding to these industries. And many times my
Yes.
experience also have been that journalists and as researchers, we many times criticize them, but many
Mhm.
times we don't come forward to get them understand if you're doing it
Right.
wrong, how to do it right. So they also
Right.
mention the same thing. It's very easy to criticize, but at the same time, we should also understand this development is supporting some kind of growth of the country as well. So
Correct.
I
Yeah.
believe in a model where criticism is less important than coming forward and ensuring that you, if you're not able to change 100%, at least you contribute 20% to understand them how they can improve. With the kind
Right.
of private sector financial support that is required on ground, I think it's very, very
Right.
important for us to go for that hand holding.
So that's an interesting observation indeed. And I guess positive criticism will definitely help all the parties to improve, and we can then head towards sustainable development as everyone talks about it. So Shalini ji, we are now coming to the some of the last questions, and since you are a leader in the environmental field, ecosystem health management, and as a woman scientist working in conservation and sustainability, what challenges have you faced, and where do you think exactly positive changes need to happen?
I think one of the most common and important question always asked to women working in this sector. Uh,
Mhm.
I think it has both challenges and positive things. When I discuss and I take my journey as an example, I
Yes.
think I remember my PhD days when I was always inside the forest areas because my guide always wanted me to be with the community
Mhm.
to learn more. Initially, it was tough, but I think that made us what we are. But I
Mhm.
remember being a city bred girl, my father was always concerned of what I'm doing inside the forest or what this
Mhm.
kind of career means. But over the
Right.
years, I think he also got to understand about this. So first thing is understanding what this profession requires, and
Right.
it's very unconventional kind of a career that women many times choose.
Mhm.
So I think the first thing is understanding at the very level. Though
Yes.
my parents have been really people who have been very motivating, but understanding this kind of profession comes as the first thing in their mind. And then
Mhm.
I think once you start working, females' biological clock and the career
Mhm.
clock both are overlapping with each other. So
Yeah.
the marriage, the kids, and then everything is going together. I should
Right.
not say it's a challenge because my mother always told me that mental blocks are only in the head. If you
Mhm.
really
Wow.
want to make the change, you can always make that change. You can always
Mhm.
find the time. And thanks to my supporting family, my son and also my students over the years have really helped me to come out of these challenges, and especially supportive male colleagues. I think that's very, very important. And I learned from my male colleagues, my seniors, who helped me understand as a female colleague
Right.
what kind of projects I should always have, what kind
Okay.
of zeal, because at the end of the day, your passion is zeal is your inherent. The light
Right.
comes from. So if
Yeah.
that keeps burning inside, I think there is no challenge outside.
Mhm.
Uh,
Right.
Definitely, there are certain things, and with good support, if you have people who are not supportive, you have definitely people around you who are supportive. And
Mhm.
you also need to understand that there are challenges both for males and females. They're not
Yes.
different. There are only certain that are very different.
Yeah.
But I think with a supportive environment, confidence and grit and passion, I think we can navigate this way. It's not that not that tough.
Wow. So that's really encouraging words for many young students or many other early career researchers, established researchers to look up to and perhaps do excel in their careers. So finally, coming to the last question, Dr. Shalini ji, it has been a really wonderful discussion with you, and I think we learned a lot, many things from you. I learned a lot of things from you personally. So thanks again for that. Coming to the last question, you are working in this field for many years. You are a veteran in the environment field. So what message do you have for our young audience starting out in conservation?
This veteran tag really means really big. I feel like I'm old now, but nevertheless, uh, uh, I think youngsters nowadays have more opportunities than what we had almost 20 years back, and even 30 years back or so, where we had limited opportunities, limited women working in challenging locations and situations. Now, when I see youngsters doing so many interesting things. For example, I remember when I was doing my master's in botany and I did my PhD in forestry, I thought if
Mhm.
there was someone around to tell me there is a field called forestry in my master's and graduation, or a
Mhm.
field is called wildlife sciences, I would have
Right.
better opted it. But I think there is
Mhm.
a lot of awareness. I see a lot of motivated, already young faculties around. Uh,
Yes.
so I see there is a lot of interest coming, especially, and many people are following their heart and mind and passion to come to this
Mhm.
field. But one of the most important message that I would like to give is, as I mentioned, this is a very unconventional field. If you go to certain fields, where might be you get a job immediately after your master's or graduation, but this field
Yes.
requires commitment, and I think
Mhm.
that light inside will take you for a longer way. And I think the most important memories and most important moments that you create while working in this field are the most important learning lessons. So my message to all of you is that just follow your passion and try to get the best of lessons possible. Never shy away in networking. Go reach out to senior people. Many of them are really eager to meet you all, and never stop learning. Till now, I ensure that every year I brush up my skills with at least two new courses. So you all should always plan to keep learning, keep reading more and more, because my PhD students, I make sure every morning I send them at least 3 or 4 new papers that are publishing somewhere in the world, because that
Wow.
helps them be updated. So being updated, learning new skills, and then following your passion are something that will definitely make you help you to achieve your dreams, achieve your goals in this career. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shalini ji. That was a wonderful and short message indeed. Keep learning, don't stop, and I think the world will be yours. So, Dr. Shalini ji, having you as a podcast speaker, I think we learned a lot of things today. So, we are really looking forward to have more and more people connected to you as students, young students, as well as to learn new things from this particular podcast. So we'll be also sharing a lot of links about the various keywords that we use in this podcast. so people can refer and they can understand better. Thank you, Dr. Shalini, for giving your time and having this very wonderful discussion with us today.
Thank you so much, Pankajji, and thank you so much for this bioscience support to People for Nature. I'm really happy to be part of this. Thank you so much.